Article 9 of the Constitution. It explains our county and municipal governments. And guess what? There's nothing in this Constitution about a local school district. There's nothing in this about a school district having an authority to tax us. There's nothing in this about the powers over the people of this Commonwealth at all when it concerns our school district, and for good reason. Your school district is a non-governing body. And yet, by mandate, under Act 511 in 1965, our legislators allowed the school districts to be separated from our county and municipal governments, and they granted them the same taxing authority as you would a governing body. Our new budget comes in at $28 billion. State funding for public K through 12 education is $15 billion of that. That's the money that comes down from the state. When you tack on property and EIT tax, it now costs more to fund public education than it does to run the entire state of Pennsylvania. Again, this is just K through 12. And that should come as no surprise to us, since most of us already are aware that locally, your school taxes are 3 times as high as your county and municipal taxes combined. So hold on to your shorts, because we're about to go on to a really bumpy ride. As I go through this, I want you to keep this in your mind. Article 3, Section 31 of the Pennsylvania Constitution says, the General Assembly shall not delegate to any special commission, private corporation, or association any power to make, supervise, or interfere with any municipal improvement, money, property, or effects, whether held in trust or otherwise, or to levy taxes or perform any municipal function whatsoever. When it comes to Common Core, let's cut to the chase. Common Core has little to do with education, and it has everything to do with control. No matter how it's spun, Common Core is about the control of our children through a form of indoctrination that's being implemented at the federal level. Now, Common Core isn't something new. It's actually a logical progression of events that began happening in this country, especially in the state of Pennsylvania, about 60 years ago. After World War II, America was experiencing what has been called a baby boom. We went in 1946 to 1947, the new birth population doubled. It went from 1.5 million to 3 million people, and local governments could see the handwriting on the wall. In 6 short years, there was going to be needs for new schools, or at least expansion of the older schools, as more kids were going to be coming into our classrooms. They recognized these needs, and so did the state legislators. In 1947, the state legislators enacted what they called an emergency fund for the purpose of helping the local school districts with these new building projects and the expansions of the buildings. It was also an opportunity that our legislators took to tell us they were going to consolidate the public school code. See, up until this point, all the laws concerning education were spread out. They were not in one area. So our legislators did that. They spent the next 2 years, and the result of that was the Public School Code of 1949, which is this document, where they put it all together. But not only did they put it all together, they added stuff. And they've been adding to this since. We still call this the Public School Code of 1949, even though we're in 2013, we're still using this. That's 30 copies. This is one copy. This is all regulations. This is all regulations. Compliance by our local municipalities in good faith was going to be difficult. Our municipalities simply didn't have the revenue to take on all these regulations. So in 1953, the state legislators came up with a solution. They said, let's apply a because up until then, the primary source of funding for education was the state. It was to come down from the state. In 1953, they tackled the 1% sales tax. Then came the 1960s. Everything is about to change. The government goes on steroids. Our state and local government began its process of the creation of these new departments and agencies and commissions that were originally designed to be enforcement bodies. They were put in place to do was to enforce the legislation from the legislative body. So they were put under the office of the governor or under the office of the president because they were executive in nature. But in its process, our legislators did something that never should have happened, something that is in violation of both our state and federal constitutions. They granted to these departments, agencies, and commissions a regulating authority. They gave them the power to make laws. Now, remember, this is an executive, this is a department, agency, or commission under the executive that now has the power to legislate. We did something else. We granted them the power to apply fees, fines, and penalties without due process. So we made them judiciary as well, but not just judiciary. They were judge and jury. They come in and they say, this is a fine, you've got to pay it. There's no hearing. You can contest it, you can appeal it, but you're not actually brought forward. There's not due process under this new system of government. We refer to this as the administrative state of government. It's a fourth branch of government that expanded greatly. In a very short period of time, we had these appointed bodies with judicial, legislative, and executive powers all combined in one singular, unelected body of elite educators when it came to education. This is a system of government that is alien to the intention and design of the American form of government. And remember that our government was designed to have a system of checks and balances. The executive was to have the executive powers, legislative, the legislative powers, the judiciary, the judicial responsibilities. They were not supposed to overlap. Now, it's interesting because while they were doing this, while Pennsylvania was expanding this, they were holding a constitutional convention which resulted in the Commonwealth Constitution of 1968. That's this. It's been amended, but that's this. One of the things that hasn't been amended is Article 2, Section 1, which states, the legislative powers of this Commonwealth shall be vested in a General Assembly which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. So at the very point in time when they're granting legislative authority to an appointed, not elected body, they amended our Constitution to state that all legislative powers are supposed to be in the legislative branch. The State Board of Education is the regulatory body of the Department of Education. If you read sections 2601B through 2606B of the Public School Code of 1949, you'll read what our legislators did to the State Board of Education. The State Board of Education had three primary goals, other than making the schools fall into compliance to the law. One was to reduce the number of school districts. Two, separating the school districts from the controls of our municipal governments. And three, adopting the John Dewey principles of standardization and enforcing them through the implementation of Title 22 of the Pennsylvania Code. Now, Parts 1 and 2 are coordinated aims. The consolidations of schools were sold to the public under the pretense that it was going to save us a ton of money. Yeah, I love that, because they're doing the same thing right now with Agenda 21. Oh, regionalize. You know, get your townships to all come together because it's cheaper. It's going to be so much less expensive. It's bull. What it was essentially a rezoning of our school districts to remove the controls over those school districts from our municipal government and place them in the hands of the administrators and the school board. Then in 1960, district as a governing body. The State Board of Education has 22 members on it. One of them, the chair, doesn't have a vote. 4 of them are representatives that are appointed as a result of there being the majority and the minority chairs of the educational committees in the Senate and the House. The other 17 members are appointed by the governor. The majority of them all have very, very deep entrenched roots in the PSEA. Most of them have spent minimal time, if any time at all, in the actual classroom. This means that our school boards are controlled by the State Board of Education and the State Teachers Union. But since there's virtually no difference between the State Board of Education and the PSEA, that's just cut right to the chase. Our school boards are controlled by the PSEA. From 1963 to 1988, we went from 2009 school districts to 501 districts, and it didn't save us a dime. In fact, the cost of education has skyrocketed since then. The cost of administration in the schools alone has increased by 59% since 1990. Wages, salaries, and benefits now make up 75 to 80% of all local school district budgets, with another 10 going to debt-related building construction, and another 10 going to cost and supplies for transportation. This emergency tax for this new building project and renovations that they enacted in 1947 was amended again by mandate, Act 511, when the school property tax would become the major revenue funding source of all education spending in the state. The total cost of education in Pennsylvania is $28 billion. $13 billion of that comes from the property tax, and another $2 billion comes from your local EIT tax. The majority of the funding is being funded through your property. Pennsylvania education spending has increased from $4 billion in 1980 to over $25 billion in 2009, which was a 133% increase in per pupil spending. In other words, it went from $6,171 a year, adjusted for 2010 dollars, $6,171 a year per student, to $14,420 2010 numbers. School construction and debt spending has doubled in 10 years. Remember, this just the prevailing wage alone is costing construction costs to increase by more than 20%, and repealing that mandate alone would save $400 million annually in construction costs to our schools. Through Title 22 of the Pennsylvania Code that was written by the State Board of Education, they regulate our schools' curriculums, they impose the standardization on our schools, they control the hiring and the firing of our teachers, they control school discipline, they control anything related to education. And many parts of Title 22 of the Pennsylvania Code read more like a union contract because it contains so many protections to the teachers' union. The only thing they don't protect is your property, and that's why governments were instituted in the first place. Let's look at some of these control factors. The standardization principles in education were influenced by a man named John Dewey. This is at the turn of the century. Those standardization principles started to be taught in every institution of higher education for good reason, because that's where your teachers go to learn how to be teachers. In John Dewey's view, the individual exists only to serve society. The individual's conformity to a group is more important than actual facts. According to Dewey, learning is only relevant in context of what society determines as important. The acquisition of knowledge for its own sake was regarded as selfish indulgence. It's because they didn't want people actually doing research and finding out the regulations that control us. According to Dewey, government comes first, and its needs must therefore be paramount over the individual, and that government shapes individuals, not vice versa. So claimed John Dewey. Dewey wanted top-down control, so he infiltrated our higher institutions, and that brought about the radicalization of America we saw in the 1960s. This mentality went from our college into our classrooms, and the people that were trained in those colleges became our teachers. Then we wonder why personal responsibility and accountability have been replaced in our schools by parties, promiscuity, celebrity worship, and violence, which are all described as the new normal of education. Children who differ from this new normal are open to ridicule, not just from their peers, but from their teachers. We're seeing this all over America. Kid goes to church wearing an NRA t-shirt. You suspend him for speaking his mind, for standing up to the principles of our Constitution. John Dewey is recognized as an educational leader by UNESCO. That's the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. They called him the most significant American philosopher of the first half of the 20th century, and Dewey's indoctrination techniques have been incorporated into teaching sustainability through Agenda 21 in all of our schools. It's already there. Dewey's principles have been implemented several times in different forms since the 1960s through the State Board of Education. Not through our legislative body, through the State Board of Education. There was new math. And then we tried to apply math principles to reading by diagramming sentences. Both of those programs failed miserably. In spite of, we also went to open classrooms, another program that failed. Race to the top, it failed. In spite of these repeated failures of the Dewey principles in education, this has never stopped these elite educators from spending more and more of our money to ram these failing programs down our throats. Pennsylvania entered into standardization in 1999 through mandates enacted by the Department of Education. From 1999 until 2009, what we have seen as a result of this is a continual stagnation of test scores while the rest of the world is passing America by. America now places 17th in the developed world for education, according to a global report by education firm Pearson. South Korea, Japan, and Finland have all passed us. A report recently published by Harvard University's Program on Education Policy and Governance found that students in Latvia, Chile, and Brazil are making gains in academics 3 times faster than American students, while those in Portugal, Hong Kong, Germany, Poland, Liechtenstein, Slovenia, Colombia, and Lithuania are improving at twice the rate of our students in America. An analysis in 2009, Pennsylvania Systems of School Assessment Scores revealed that suddenly we had this surge of normally high test scores. As a result, Pennsylvania cited more than 140 educators for misconduct tied to cheating on these standardized tests. According to these regulations, none of those teachers can be fired for this because we do not tie teacher performance to student performance. They still teach, they still receive their pay, they're protected. In 2012, that same testing was heavily moderated, and those test results demonstrated something that most of us knew all along. The educational quality in America is still stagnating. That might not be a problem if the rest of the world was also stagnating, but they're not. And what that's doing is pushing us further and further behind. And this is a risk to national security. The rest of the world is advancing ahead of us in this process, and that becomes a risk to the security of this nation. The problem with standardized testing is that it approaches education through a cookie-cutter formula. Each student becomes a part of the collective. There are no individuals. It not only requires what should be taught, it regulates how it's supposed to be taught. And what this does is actually tie the hands of our inspirational as bad as they really are. And there are bad teachers. People concerned to us should be asking the important question about what are education, what are these elite educators, what do they mean by standardization? What standards are they going to be teaching us? You see, there's a difference between the average teacher in the classroom and the educators who are developing this curriculum who spend no time in the classroom. This is an elite body. And if it really was all about the children, don't you think they would really be alarmed at what's happening to the educational system in America? Make no mistake, it's either incompetence or it's intentional. You can't continually fail our students unless it's one or the other. Fortunately, I'm of the mindset that it's intentional. It's bad enough that we see this in our individual states, but when the government felt they needed to get into this mix, they created their own Department of Education. And then along came President Bush and No Child Left Behind. I don't have the book here, but it's another 607 pages of regulation. Of course, it failed. And our teachers' unions and these elite educators demanded that the failure was in no way because of the teachers or the curriculum or the programs. It was because there wasn't enough money. So that gave us Obama's race to the top, where schools would now compete for federal monies to fund education. Race to the top is built on phases. Each phase is only explained as it's being implemented. Can you imagine taking federal money to participate in a program that A, you have no real controls over, B, you have no way of knowing what's required of you in the future, and you have no concept of how much it's going to cost in the long term compared to how much you're actually going to receive to get it done. Yet that's exactly what our elite educators did. And they're developing our curriculums for math and economics in our schools. Common Core was born out of Obama's race to the top, and it was implemented in 2010 by the State Board of Education with absolutely no oversight by our General Assembly. The majority of the legislators, when we started contacting them, weren't even remotely aware that it even existed. Now, proponents of Common Core, they tell us that they don't actually control the curriculum. They do control the tests. They don't deny that. Now, the federal funding is based on the performance on those tests. So do you think that would push schools into teaching the curriculum to the test? If you control the tests, you control the curriculum, and if you control the curriculum, you control the student. And John Dewey would be very, very proud. When this criticism is leveled against this federal intrusion of Common Core, we're told that the state is going to have 15% wiggle room. I'm sorry. But if these educators can't figure out that 15% wiggle room is not choice in education, that it's not control, and you're not actually being held by the taskmasters, they don't deserve to be doing anything with curriculum in our schools. They shouldn't be there in the first place. You become a prisoner of the regulations. Now, the cost to implementation is $645 million. Of that, we have received $41.3 million. $600 million. And during the House hearings on this, we were told by the Secretary, Deputy Secretary of Education, that it was to be paid for through the local option. I don't know about you, but property tax isn't an option when the bill comes due. I don't see this as an option. There's no option to this. That Common Core was put together by the standards of Common Core was put together by the Council of Chief State School Officers, CCSSO, and by the National Governors Association. The Council of Chief State School Officers is an organization that exists solely for the purpose of promoting trade unions. CCSSO works on behalf of the state teacher union throughout this nation. As far as the National Governors Association, you know there are good governors and there are bad governors, but very few of our governors are actually educators, and I question if some of them are even educators. But even less of them have actually spent time in a classroom. Yet these are the people who are deciding the curriculum. And both of these organizations have benefited from generous contributions from Bill and Melinda Gates to advance Common Core. Now that might sound very philanthropic, but it's anything but philanthropic. Microsoft stands to benefit tremendously from the implementation of Common Core because it's a shift away from textbook learning to online learning. We're going to need computers in every classroom. Every kid's going to have a laptop or an iPhone, and we're going to pay for that. The Gates Foundation, there are several aspects of this that should alarm us. First of all, the Gates Foundation's favorite charity is Planned Parenthood. So you think that they're going to advance that agenda in that curriculum? Microsoft also signed a cooperative agreement with the United Nations Education Board, UNESCO, in full support of UNESCO's Education for All program, which cites education as a core component to implementing Agenda 21 throughout the world. Under Education for All, in Chapter 36, it says, both formal and non-formal education are indispensable in changing people's attitudes. To be effective, environmental and developmental education should deal with the dynamics of both the physical/biological and socio-economic development, as well as human, which may include spiritual, that's in that text, development. And all of this should be integrated in all disciplines, and it should employ formal and non-formal methods. The UN's partnership with Gates reveals what some of the standards of Common Core is going to be. Environmental education will be incorporated into all aspects of formal education. Any value or attitude held by anyone globally that stands independent to that of the United Nations definition of sustainable education must change because those attitudes are unacceptable. And education will be belief and spiritually based as defined by the global collective. Such a massive takeover of education is not going to come cheap. That's $645 million. Look, this is a government. Have you ever known the government to do anything where they came in under budget? The State Board of Education has fought every attempt at alternative education choices, and they've been no friend to homeschooling. They have fought against parental controls in education by turning the PTA into a glorified fundraising network for our schools. And there has been this push to move us away from textbook education into the electronic medium. Today, many teachers are already using online curriculum that's approved by the State Department of Education. Recently in the Lebanon school districts, one of the questions that came up from this online curriculum concerned a mother who found a barrette under the bed in their daughter's room that didn't belong to the mother but the daughter. So daddy was having sexual relations with another woman behind the mother's back in, of all places, the daughter's bed. This was a lesson for third graders. The average age of a third grader is 9. Now the parents went in and complained, and the principal and the teachers both agreed that this was inappropriate. But I asked him, if the teacher honestly thought the material was inappropriate, why in the hell did she teach Milgram, professor emeritus at Stanford, was the only math instructor on the Common Core Validation Committee. And he refused to sign off on the math standards of Common Core, stating that it would put our children in our schools 2 years further behind the rest of the world in math standards. Zeb Warman, who designed math standards in California that many people actually believe are the best educational, when it comes to math, the best educational program in the country, along with Bill Ayers of the American Principal Project, went so far as to state that if the states adopt Common Core for math, it would place our students so far behind the math standards that they would be inadmissible to any graduate college anywhere in the country. Literature experts point out that 70% of the reading material in the classroom has to be derived from informational text. Call it what it is, propaganda. And the developers have created a list of recommended reading. I'd like to give you a couple of them. One is the Federal Bank of San Francisco's Fed Views, because apparently no education is completed until our children understand the joys and values of the Federal Reserve. I mean, what self-respecting 10th grader doesn't want to hear from the economy's master puppeteer about the expanding of the controls of the stock market, the expropriation of fixed income recipients, and the manipulation of unemployment status so that Congress can continue to borrow on the cheap? I mean, you wouldn't want the Fed's reputation to be tarnished by some outside and independent source. No, certainly not. You need to get it straight from the mouth of the Fed, exactly the way they want you to believe it is. Forget constitutionality. The Fed is here to serve you. Just ask them. Another document is the evolution of the grocery bag. This document begins by stating the much reviled bottleneck of the American supermarket. What it is an attack on our consumer-based economy. Now look, I don't love going to the grocery store. It's certainly not on my top 10 list of favorite pastimes. But reviled, it's hardly a sentiment that I hold about the grocery store because I like to eat. I like to eat, you know, so that's part of the process. I gotta go to the store or I gotta grow it. It's easier to go to the store. Healthcare costs in McAllen, Texas. Why McAllen, Texas? Well, McAllen, Texas is a border town in Texas. Part of the focus is a promotion of the legalization of immigrants. It consists of attacks on both medical doctors and hospitals, calling them greedy profiteers, where the heroes of the analysis are doctors who have stopped charging fees based on treatment that exists solely through salaries that are determined by the government. Another document, Executive Order 13243. I don't know if you've read executive orders. Exciting reading. This one is strengthening federal environment, energy, and transportation management through EPA regulatory means. This executive order actually mandates the creation of a new job at each federal agency where a senior civilian officer is to be responsible for the implementation of environmental responsibilities in each department. This includes the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Education, every federal agency. And they're all paid at level 4 of the executive schedule, which was $155,550 in January of 2012. And you may have noticed that there's a pattern of indoctrination. Enforcing schools in which 70% of classroom education into reading text comes at the expense of classic literature. Things like Shakespeare, Hemingway, Steinbeck, and others. This is important because those books celebrate human nature, cultural diversity, and anything that refutes this collectivism has to be removed promote individualism in thinking and in lifestyle. Just get in line, celebrate the joys of the new world order of sustainability. Brown shirts with goose stepping are optional, at least for now. The State Board of Education is also taking part in a data mining program. I'm sure you've heard about this in relation to Common Core. They began this back in the early part of the 2000s. They did it when they pushed standardization of tests. See, that's what they use to develop what they're going to teach, data mining. It's also a lucrative business. Besides the invasion of personal privacy issues, this information is sold to businesses. Once they have that information, it becomes impossible to stop them from calling you, spamming your email. Again, that's just the nuisance part of data mining. There are other issues that we need to be seriously aware of. In our schools, this is a particularly dangerous path to go down because the medical records are part of that data mining process. Polling is a form of data mining. You know how we manipulate elections through polling. This is what they're going to be using this information to. Imagine what happens when your family history, your medical records, your religious affiliation, your political party registration, and everything else is in some huge government-run database where paid government number crunchers are working around the clock. There's too many Mormons or too many Catholics in one area of the country, no problem. Let's just wage war against them. Too many whites in a particular county, no problem. Let's just wage war against them, use the welfare system to relocate people into those districts, and change the culture of that community. Section 99.5 of the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act regulations states, when a student becomes an eligible student, the rights accorded to and consent required of parents under this part transfer to the student. Now, I'm not making this up. An eligible student is a child in kindergarten. So when the government steps in and asks little Susie in kindergarten if she cares that they share her school records with Bill Gates so he can exploit her for personal profits, the parents have no say. The rights are transferred from the parent to that kid in kindergarten. Seriously? And we don't have an issue with this? First of all, rights aren't transferable. The school board is claiming a higher authority than the parents when it comes to permission related to their child. And I'm going to go so far as to say this, they're claiming a higher authority than God. Our rights come from God, not government. Of equal concern to us should be that under Section 99.8, it creates a system in our public schools that function as a law enforcement unit that functions independent and free of local law enforcement, and able to enact any state, local, or federal law. And we identify it for what it is. We're going to turn our public education system into an indoctrinational center that's run like a police state. All of this federal intrusion in our public schools is illegal. Under the law, state education is not in our Constitution. Our education itself is not in our Constitution. The rightful role and responsibility for education remains in the state. It's time to nullify all these federal intrusions into our states when it comes to education. The question remains, do we have the leadership in our state government to stand up? It's also time to end this empowerment of the state departments, especially the State Department of Education, to begin to place all oversight to education back squarely in the hands of where our Constitution says it belongs, and that's in the General Assembly. They don't have the ability to enforce this. We need to remember that. I mean, when they first did this in 1965, the school district said, "That's nice, thank you," and they went on their way. They needed the State Board of Education to function as a law enforcement body. The elites in education, they can care less about our sovereign and inherent rights, much less about the protections that are afforded to the rights to our rights by our state and federal constitution. And I ask you, with such disdain for the rule of law, we need to ask ourselves a very serious question. Should these people have any role at all in the education of our children? Why not only say no, I say that not only should these educators not be allowed to have anything to do with the education of our children, I say these individuals, regardless of the credentials behind their name, are an enemy to the foundation of the principles in America and shouldn't be allowed anywhere near our children.
Right.
We can stop Common Core, and we should. We need to demand that Common Core be eliminated, but understand this, we cannot afford to stop there. Common Core is a symptom of a disease. We need to go back and we need to review the public school code, and we need to remove the regulatory powers that were granted to the State Board of Education and put those powers back under the oversight of our General Assembly, where we, the people, can keep an eye on that. Instead of having public meetings in buildings that you need an access code to get into. If we really want to stop the powers that special interests and unions hold over education, we have to undo what has been done in the last 50 years concerning education. And the one necessary step of this is to repeal Act 511 of 1965 by eliminating the school property tax. Any legislation that does this must empower real local controls of future spending by putting those controls in the hands of the people who live in those school districts, not in 9 ignored school board members. We need to mandate this to government. It's time for us to start mandating to government instead of them mandating to us. We don't work for them. They work for us. We must make certain that all future mandates concerning education has to go through the General Assembly, who, under our Constitution, are the ones who are supposed to provide for a thorough and efficient system of education. There's only one piece of legislation that does this, and that's HB SB 76, and it is, in my opinion, the most important piece of legislation in front of the General Assembly in Pennsylvania at this point in time. Without this, Common Core is just going to rear its ugly head again, and it will do it under a new name, and it will have more power, and it will be harder to stop. Without a way to pass the funding for programs like this down to the taxpayer through the school property tax, all programs like this will die. We have got to understand that the problem in this country is this fourth branch of government that's been created, this administrative state, because they're really the ones that are regulating us. They're really the ones that are passing laws. Where these agencies were initially enacted to enforce legislation that we could oversee, they are now writing legislation that our legislators later will agree to, once it's already in place. That had to be by design, so they would have someone to blame. We stand and we look at what's happening, we look at the IRS, we look at the NSA, we look at these abuses to our rights. And we have a Congress that's looking at them and saying, well, we don't know how this happened. We don't know how, so they have hearings and they bring these people in and they ask them questions. How did this happen? How did this happen? And then we think that our legislators have oversight over these agencies and departments. If they had oversight, they'd know what was going on. But they don't. We need legislation like HB 76, SB 76, in other areas. Because look, HB 76 is a property tax shift. No excuses there. But the far-reaching consequences, benefits of this bill are other things that it does. One is it puts this Can you see the State Board of Education going before our General Assembly and looking at them and saying, we'd like to implement a program, but we don't know whether it works or not, and it's only going to cost $645 million. It's not going to fly, especially in the way things are today in today's economy.
I think they go for it.
I don't. And I don't for several reasons. We saw what happened with Queen Street. And that can happen over and over again when people become angry enough about what this is going to do. I think the other part of this, and you'll hear more about this, but the property tax issue, since its implementation, what this has done to our economy, what this has done to jobs, what this has done to our homes. And it's all part of this growing of government through this administrative state. And we either put an end to that, or we're going to put an end to this country. I tell people this, and I know this gives people a rise, but I firmly believe this. We traded the Republic during the Civil War. We traded the Republic for a democracy. And in 1932, we traded democracy for socialism. And in 1916, we traded socialism for fascism. That we now live in a fascist country. When you look, the motto of the Italian for the fascists was Stato Corporatismo, the corporate state. Our governments are being run by shadow organizations that are all appointed to positions through special interest, campaign funding, or writing rules and regulations that are controlling every aspect of our life. That's fascism. That's the elite controlling through an oligarchy. There's not a democracy. If there was a democracy where the majority rules, Obamacare would be dead. We wouldn't even be having that discussion because the majority of Americans hate it. Why do we have it? Because the corporate state says we're going